Good evening, everybody. I didn't realise Belgium was so much like Spain until I got here. It was similar, the weather. So my job this evening is to introduce you to three ancient Buddhist texts. They were written down probably 500 or 600 years after the time of the Buddha. At least two of them were. I'm going to talk about three texts. Two of them were probably written about 100 or 200 years in the Common Era. And the third one was probably written a few hundred years later, 400 or 500 years in the Common Era. And they're Mahayana Sutras. And
is it Common Era?
Common Era is after Christ.
Okay.
Yeah. When people try to read Mahayana Sutras, they usually come unstuck. You open a book, and it looks like a book. You know, it looks like any book. And because we're used to books, we assume that it's going to be a similar kind of book to the kind of books that we usually read, because it looks like that, doesn't it? And as soon as we look at a book, we have all kind of assumptions about the book, because we're used to books in the West, the way they're set out and so on. But when I enthuse about Mahayana Sutras to people and they go, "Oh, I'll read that," and then next time I see them, I say, "How did you get on?" And they go, "Oh, just after a couple of pages, I just crazy." That's usually what they say, crazy. So what I'm going to try to do is give you some background, so that if you did ever want to read a Mahayana Sutra, you've at least been warned that they're really nothing like the kind of books that you're used to, probably. So to do that, I thought maybe the best thing to do would be to go right back to the time of the Buddha. As far as we can tell anyway, 500 years before Christ, so before Common Era. And in those days, there was just the Buddha, who was a human being. And he gained awakening or enlightenment, he became the Buddha. Buddha means awakened one, so he became the Buddha after many years practicing the Dharma. And he became the Buddha, and in historical terms, he was the first Buddha ever, in historical terms. Right? So then he spent the rest of his life, we don't know how old he was when he became the Buddha, but some scholars guess about 35 years old. And then he spent the rest of his life, until we think he was 85 years old, walking around India teaching his Dharma. And then he died. So, in a way, you could say it was very simple. He was a human being, he practiced the spiritual life, he became the Buddha, he taught. And when he taught, he had such a big effect on people that many people that he met, they also became enlightened. As enlightened as he was, although they didn't call them Buddha, they reserved that title for him, you know, making it special. And people who were enlightened after him were called Arahant. I won't go into what that means, it doesn't matter for now. So it's a very simple picture really. You've got this man living in India 2,500 years ago, teaching, and other people were impressed and they practiced what he taught, and many of them became enlightened. So very, very simple. Then as time went by, you see, the way I've put that, we kind of project onto that story our own I'm getting like this now that I'm getting older. I can't think of simple words. It's a simple word I'm looking for. world view. We project our own world view onto that story. But it's not quite like that. But anyway, he taught. As time went by, the ancient Indians had a very different worldview than we have. They weren't materialistic like we are. They weren't scientific materialists. They didn't believe that this is all there was. You know, they lived in a very magical kind of, what we would consider to be a very magical world. The Buddha lived in a very magical world. It wasn't just human beings. So the Buddha was known as the teacher of gods and humans. Gods, all sorts of strange beings around in those days, they believed. But okay, so there's the Buddha, and he died, and he was the first ever Buddha. But as time went by, the ancient Indians, they began to expand that story. And they said, no, there wasn't just the Buddha, there was a Buddha previous to him. Way, way back in the past, a long time back in the past, not the past in historical terms. So many, many kalpas or aeons ago, there was a previous Buddha called Dipankara. Now, Dipankara you'll be able to remember because you've got a woman order member here called Dipankari. So there was this Buddha called Dipankara way before the Buddha that we know about. Now that was a long, long time before the Buddha. Many, many kalpas, uncountable kalpas. Now how long is a kalpa? So a kalpa is an unimaginably long time. Unimaginably long time. So to give you an idea how long a kalpa is, the ancient Indians tell a story. And the story is like this. You've got a huge rock, 1 mile square. Yeah? 1 mile across, 1 mile down, etc. Massive rock. And every 100 years, a goddess comes down with a piece of Benares silk. It has to be Benares silk, the best possible kind of silk. And she just strokes that rock, and then she goes back up to heaven. And then 100 years later, she comes down and she does it again. Eventually, after doing this every 100 years, that piece of silk wears the rock down to nothing. Yeah? How long would that take? That's a kalpa. Yeah? So that's a kalpa. And so uncountable, countless, innumerable kalpas ago, there was another Buddha. So you see what they're doing. You're not meant to take this literally. Because you can't imagine one kalpa, let alone uncountably many kalpas. It's just impossible to get in your mind. So what they're doing is they're trying to, in a way, blow your mind, to use a term that I used to use as a teenager. We don't use that term anymore, but they're trying to completely change your terms of reference. So then, okay, so you've got the Buddha. He was originally the first Buddha, but then now you've got this idea of a previous Buddha, and then as time went by, they had a Buddha previous to him, going way, way back, and eventually you get 81 Buddhas previous to this one. And there's going to be a Buddha in the future, of course, and he's called Maitreya. That's the myth that in the future, when the Dharma dies out in so many kalpas in the future, there's going to be another Buddha called Maitreya. Yeah. So, whereas in the early days you just had this Buddha, a human being, now you've got this kind of idea of many, many Buddhas, and he's just one of many, many Buddhas, so going through time. Later on, they began to expand the idea to space, not just time, but to space, and they said that, well actually, there's only, according to tradition, you can only have one Buddha at a time. Yeah, only one Buddha. The world can only take one Buddha at a time. But then, later, the Mahayana Buddhists said, well, this isn't the only world system. There are many, many world systems, countless, innumerable world systems all over the universe. And some of those world systems have a Buddha in them. So now you've got the idea not just of Buddhas in the past and Buddhas in the future, but Buddhas all over the universe, right now, in this moment, Buddhas everywhere. see that Buddha up there? That's not a historical Buddha, right? That's a mythical Buddha. That's the Buddha Amitabha, and he lives innumerable world systems in the West. Where's the West? Which is West? Does anybody know? No, it doesn't matter then. Over there. Okay, so he's over there. Uncountably world systems in the West. Amitabha lives, and I'm going to tell you more about him and his world in a moment, because that's what these texts are about. So now, you've got this idea that the world you're living in isn't just like a human world. The world you're living in is cosmic. It's vast, not only in terms of time, stretching way back in the past and way into the future, but also in terms of space. Massive. You're living in this huge cosmic arena. And that's how Mahayana Buddhism began. So Mahayana Buddhism, Maha means great, Yana is vehicle or the way, so it's the great way to enlightenment. And 400 or 500 years after the Buddha, what the Buddhists did, they took the Buddha's teaching outside of the human historical world that they were living in, and they reimagined the universe. They reimagined the universe to be this unimaginably vast place, and our lives are tiny in this vast place. Yeah? You're all looking really blank at the moment. So I don't know how this is going down, and this is your first time here. It's okay. So far it's okay. I'll ask you later how you get. So you are following me so far?
Yes.
Okay. So then you've got many Buddhas all over the universe, and they've all got their own world systems. Now, a world system, you could say it's like a galaxy, although they didn't see it quite like that. But that's probably about the closest you can get to. The galaxies all over the universe, and some of them have Buddhas in. And the ones that have Buddhas in are called Buddha fields. Buddha fields, yeah? And we live in a universe or a galaxy with a Buddha, of course. So we live in a Buddha field, and there are countless millions, trillions of them all over the universe. And then they came up with the idea that there are two kinds of Buddha fields. There are pure Buddha fields, and there are impure Buddha fields. Now I'm going to tell you about both, and then I'm going to ask you to guess what kind of Buddha field we're living in. So I'll talk about pure Buddha fields first. A pure Buddha field has no suffering in it. That's a bit of a clue, isn't it? A pure Buddha field, there's no suffering. So in a pure Buddha field, there are only two kinds of beings in a pure Buddha field. There are humans and there are gods. And there's no suffering in a pure Buddha field. We, of course, don't live in a pure Buddha field. We live in an impure Buddha field, where there are 6 kinds of beings. Human beings, gods, hungry ghosts, hell realms, and animals, that's 5, and anti-gods. Do you know about these 6 realms of existence? Do you know all about that? You don't, but okay, they're quite interesting. So I'll tell you a little bit about them, because Buddhism's quite interesting in that it doesn't make a difference. Like we Westerners, we make a difference in our mind between our mental states and the world we live in. Yeah, they're 2 different things. But in Buddhism, they're not. The mental state you're in is the world you're in. Yeah, a mental state is a world. So the human realm is the one we're in, and it's characterized by both suffering and pleasure, as you know from your own experience. Sometimes things are good, things are nice, and you're having a nice time, and other times you're not having a nice time at all, and you're suffering quite a lot. Although it's not that simple, because often they're fused together. So you're having a nice day, but something bad happens in the midst of that day as well. So it's all mixed together. Suffering and pleasure are mixed together in the human realm. The God realm is pure pleasure and beauty and joy and love. That's the God realm. The hell realm is pure pain, The animal realm is the realm of very limited horizons, where you're not looking beyond today, you're not looking beyond eating and drinking and copulating, and that's it. The anti-gods want what the gods have got, but they don't want to work to get that. So they want to grab what the gods have got. So they're like really aggressive beings, highly aggressive, competitive. Is that all of them? No, they're hungry ghosts. The hungry ghosts live in a realm where you can never be satisfied. So the pictures of the hungry ghosts are very interesting. They're like living in like a desert, and they're really skinny, tiny little skinny limbs, but huge extended stomachs and tiny little mouths. And they're trying to get into their big stomachs as much as they can, but their mouths are so small, they just can't get enough in. So they're like the pictures of that greedy, never satisfied state of mind that we can sometimes be in. Well, maybe you never get into that state of mind. You know people who do, you know. So, those are the 6 realms, and there are also, of course, 6 states of mind. Yeah? The competitive, aggressive state of mind, the pleasurable, happy state of mind, etc., etc. So we live in, coming back to my main topic, we live in an impure realm where all these realms are possible for us, all these states of mind are possible. And our Buddha is Shakyamuni. So, that's an introduction to the text. So these 3 texts are mythical and they're magical, and they explain in great detail one of these mythical worlds, the one over in the West, many hundreds, uncountably many world systems over in the West. You've had enough, yeah. Yeah. Come back to a time when it's less crazy. Are you sure you want to stick around for this? So, they explain in great detail what this world is like. And I'll just say a few words about it. The 3 texts describe the world a bit differently. It's almost like almost 3 different worlds, although there are similarities. So, first of all, the ground in Sukhavati is completely golden. Not golden colour, but made of gold. So the whole ground, and it's massive, you know, it's like a whole world, and the ground is completely golden. And there are lotus ponds in that world. And the water in the lotus ponds is completely pure, crystalline, pure water. And so that you can look down and you can see right down to the bottom of the lakes and the ponds. And when you see down the bottom of the ponds, it's golden sand. Not sand that looks like gold, but real golden sand, little bits of gold, it's just like that. And on the lotus ponds there are lotuses. Now, depending on which sutra you read, in one of the sutras they're quite small, they're only about the size of a cartwheel, about this big, about that big. That's a really small lotus compared to some of the others. We'll stay with the small one for now. And I'm describing the shorter of the 3 suttas to you now. It's only 6 pages long and it's manageable. So I'll carry on with that one. So the lotuses are deep blue in colour, dark blue in colour, or they're bright yellow in colour, or they're pure white in colour, or they're red in colour, or they're multicoloured. So that's the lotuses in the lotus ponds. And then you've got trees. And the trees are made of jewels. They're jewel trees. So gold, silver, lapis lazuli. Now I've discovered that not many people know what lapis lazuli is. So lapis lazuli is a semi-precious stone. It's a little bit like turquoise, but a bit darker. and it has gold pyrites running through. So gold, silver, lapis lazuli, crystal. I'm giving you quite a lot of detail here, aren't I? Crystal, sapphire, deep blue sapphire, ruby, and emerald, green emerald. So the trees are made of these things. And there are birds. But the birds aren't real birds, because you can't have real birds in a Pure Land because there's no animals in the Pure Land. But you can't have a land without birds. You know, how can you do that? So they're birds that they've been manifested by the magical power of the Buddha. You right?
How many birds complain?
Yeah. Well, the birds are golden in colour, and the reason they exist is partly because you can't have a lovely land without birds. You need birds, but when you hear the sound of the birds, you can hear them tweeting and squawking and quacking. But when you really listen carefully, they're teaching the Dharma. Yeah? So you can hear the Dharma through the sound of the birds. Okay, that's enough, isn't it? That's enough to give you an idea about the Pure Land. So now you're thinking, well, you're probably thinking, oh, so what's all that about? Why? Why do that? And the shorter sutra is, well, it's short, so it doesn't go into great detail, but the next sutra is long, and it goes into massive detail. And it's much crazier than this world, you know. The loses are huge, you know, they're miles long and big and multicoloured, and Buddhas are coming out of them. It's crazy kind of land. So now I need to explain to you why do that. And you can understand now why when people, Westerners, pick up a sutra thinking you're going to read something useful, you get this, pages and pages of this. And the question arises, why did these people do that? What is the point of it all? It's a shame that man left when he did, isn't it? Because I'm going to tell him now what's the point of it. So, how many of you have seen the film Arrival? Put your hands up if you've seen it. Okay. Arrival. Really, really good film. And it's based on a short story by Ted Chiang called The Story of Your Life. And I liked the film so much that I looked up the story, and I read the story too. So just to tell you what the film's about. It's a science fiction movie, and it's about aliens coming from another planet, but it's not one of those shooting movies. They're not having a war. The aliens come to our planet and they want to try and communicate with us. They're strange beings. They're called heptapods. They have 9 limbs. They're really weird looking in the film. And they want to communicate with us. They've got things to say to us. And so a linguist is employed by the army to try and communicate with these beings. And they're not getting anywhere because, you know, she's saying, you know, my name is Jill. My name is Jill, and they're not getting that. And then they go, like this. And she doesn't understand what they're trying to say, but they're obviously really trying to communicate. And then she decides to write something, so she writes something on a little whiteboard. My name is Jill. Jill, like that. And then they get it. And then they start to write, but the way they write is very weird. Out of their one of their limbs comes some smoke, and it forms a circle. But it's not just a circle, it's a circle with all bits on it. Sort of strange shapes. And that's their language. So then she takes a photograph, and then, you know, they spend a long time trying to figure out what they're saying, and eventually they begin to be able to communicate to each other. And what we realise, what we human beings realise, is every word is a circle for them, and every sentence is a circle, and every paragraph is a circle. Everything's circular, whereas we write in lines, right? So what this woman, Jill, That's not a name actually, but I can't remember what her name is. I'm just calling her Jill because first name that came to my mind. But what she realises is the reason everything is circular, and another thing about these circles is you can start anywhere. It doesn't have a beginning and an end. You can start anywhere in the circle. And what she realises is that these beings have a completely different experience of time. Yeah? We experience time as being linear, going from past to the present to the future, and we write in a linear way. Yeah? But the heptapods, they don't experience time like that. They experience time as simultaneous. Everything's happening simultaneously. Yeah? All the time. It's happening all the time. Do you have to go now too?
I have to.
Ah.
I have to catch my
Oh,
train. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a pity I don't get the point, but
Yeah, just getting to the really interesting bit now. Really. Yeah. So, so she realises that. And then she's watching a film of somebody telling the heptapods something about our human culture. He's trying to describe ethics and altruism to them. So I'll read you a bit of this. The negotiator was describing humans' moral beliefs, trying to lay some groundwork for the concept of altruism. Altruism, do you know what altruism is? I knew the heptapods, that's what she calls them, were familiar with the conversation's eventual outcome. Yeah, but they still participated enthusiastically. They knew exactly what this man was going to say because they don't experience time linear, so they knew the ending of what he was going to say. So then she says, if I could have described this to someone who didn't already know, she might ask, but if the heptapods already knew everything that they would ever say or hear, what was the point of their using language at all? Yeah? Why speak if you know everything that's going to happen? Yeah? A reasonable question. But language wasn't only for communication. It was also a form of action. According to speech-act theory, statements like, you're under arrest, yeah? Like a policeman, you're under arrest. Or, I christen this vessel, yeah? You following that? I christen this vessel. Or, I promise, are all performative. Performative isn't really an English word. So the word perform, you perform something. So she's making a distinction between language which is informative, which tells you something, and language is performative, which is an act. Yeah? A speaker could perform the action only by uttering the words. For such acts, knowing what would be said didn't change anything. Everyone at a wedding, anticipated the words, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Yeah? But until the minister actually said that, the ceremony didn't count. With performative language, saying equaled doing. So I'm hoping you followed that. Yeah. It's very interesting, isn't it, that often language is informative. You're telling somebody something. I was in Amsterdam last week and I was in a small group with people and Arthur Mitchell was there, and you know Arthur Mitchell, he's well. So you know now he's quite well, so that's informative. But other language is not informative, it's performative. I promise we'll finish this evening at 9:30. Yeah, that's an act. I'm doing an act there. Yeah, you follow that? Okay, so some people, when they read Buddhist texts, they get confused or disappointed because they're not informative. They're not telling you anything. They're not giving you information by which you can practice. So often we read books for information, don't we? Usually we read books for information, and we read Buddhist books for the information they give us on how to practice the Dharma. But not all Buddhist texts do that. A lot of Buddhist texts are performative, and these Buddhist texts are performative. The point of them is not to tell you anything that you don't already know, although, you know, you've never heard of a land with gold and ground and so on, so it will be informative the first time you do it. But the point of the text, it doesn't tell you how to practice the Dharma. Yeah, hundreds of pages of text, and it doesn't tell you once how to practice the Dharma. So you after a while you think, but what is the point of reading this text? Well, the point is that the text is itself a practice. It's something that is performed, not something that informs you. Yeah? It's like a puja. How many of you have done pujas? So how many times have you done a puja now? 10?
No.
100?
Maybe.
Yeah, it could be 100, couldn't it? Same words every time, yeah? Yeah. You're not learning anything new when you do it, but you're performing something together. It's an act, you know. So these texts are performative texts, and the point of them is to practice them over and over again. So a whole number of schools of Buddhism came out of these texts, and they're called Pure Land Buddhism. How many of you have heard of Pure Land Buddhism? It's just a few of you. Okay, so Pure Land Buddhism is very popular in China and Japan. It's the most popular form of Buddhism in China and Japan. And apparently there are more Pure Land Buddhists in the world than any other kind of Buddhism. Yeah? It's funny, and we know hardly anything about them, but there's millions of them. You know, reading, and what often you would do, your practice wouldn't be the mindfulness of breathing, or the metta bhavana, or a puja. What you would do in a Pure Land temple is somebody reads the text, or you all read it together, and that's the practice. You just practice that over and over again. And what you're doing, ideally, what you're doing, you're imagining. It's called Sukhavati. The land is called Sukhavati. You're imagining Sukhavati. Why do you do that? Why do you do that? And the Buddha of Sukhavati is Amitabha. So, I'll finish by going back to the Buddha now. And when you read the ancient Buddhist texts about the Buddha in India, you know, the human Buddha, we're back to the human Buddha now in India, he would be walking around India and he'd meet people. And he'd get into conversation with them, and if they were interested, he'd teach them the Dharma. But if he didn't know them, if he'd never met them before, he would teach them what's called a graduated discourse. Graduated, do you know that word? Graduated. A gradual discourse, starting at the beginning and going in steps. Yeah? And he would start by teaching them about ethics, morality, and the benefits of living an ethical life. And then he would start teaching them about generosity as a practice and the benefits of being generous. And he would teach them about renunciation, giving things up, and the benefits of that. So he'd teach them that, and he'd be observing them as he was teaching them. Be noticing the look on their face and so on. And if he thought they were ready, he would teach them the whole Dharma, which he would give them a wisdom teaching. He would teach them maybe the 3 marks of conditioned existence, that existence is inherently impermanent and fleeting, and there's no substance to anything, and etc. You know, the wisdom teachings, yeah. But he would only teach them that if they were ready, yeah. And he could see if they were ready just by the look on their face. So the text tell you exactly what that means by being ready. So I'll tell you about that. The word is kala chitta. So Now I'm going to write on this board, and you know, those of you who are here Tuesday, you know you're in for a horrible time now as I write on this board. Only I can write it because I know how to spell it, you see. So, kala. We'll start with chitta. Chitta, C-I-T-T-A, means mind or heart. So it's interesting that in Buddhism, in the ancient Indian languages, they don't have two words for the mind and the heart. You probably know this already, don't you? Yeah, I tell you stuff you already know. This is for you. Yeah. They don't split the person up into head and heart like that. You know, reason and emotion. Chitta is the inside of you. It's your interiority. It's your head, heart. It's everything. Yeah. So it's mind, heart, you could say. And kala means ready or prepared. So when the Buddha saw that the person was kala chitta, they had a heart or a mind that was ready or prepared. Prepared for what? Prepared to receive wisdom. Prepared to gain insight into the way things really are. And it's made up of four things. So the first is mudu. So it's mudu chitta. So everything's chitta, mind, heart. Mudu, beautiful word, mudu. Mudu means soft, gentle, tender. Yeah. So a soft heart, tender, a tender interior. Yeah. What this means is that, you know, sometimes someone's trying to convince you of something and you don't want to be convinced, and you kind of harden your heart against what they're saying. You don't want to know what they're trying to tell you, or you don't trust them in some way, so you harden your heart against them, and what they're saying just bounces off you. Yeah, you know that? Well, mudu is the opposite of that. Mudu is when you're soft and gentle, so that when somebody tells you something, it can actually land. Yeah, it lands. It's a bit like, because I'm in Ghent, I'm thinking of history at the moment, so I'm thinking of the wax seal of the king. You know the wax seal? And there'll be a bit of wax, warm wax, and the seal of the king would go down like that on it, and it would impress, the seal would impress itself on the wax. It can only do that because the wax was soft. Yeah, if you did that with a stone, it wouldn't work. So the mudu chitta is a bit like a heart or a mind that is ready to receive the impress of truth or reality. Yeah, you're ready to receive that. And then the next one, or the next aspect to it, is ninivarana. It's a very long word, so just talk amongst yourselves while I'm writing it. Ninivarana chitta. So, nivarana, you know what nivarana is. So, nivarana means hindrance. You know, those of you who have done the meditation course, you probably know about the 5 hindrances which prevent you from becoming concentrated. Do you know that? No, you don't. Okay. So, ni here is no. It's a bit like nay. Yeah. No hindrance. So no obstruction. So now this mind, this ready mind, is not obstructed. It's not obstructing the truth from coming in. Yeah, I would say more about that if you knew the 5 hindrances, but if you don't know the 5, I haven't got time to go into the 5 hindrances. It's 9:15, so we'll need to skip that bit. If we got time at the end, we could go back to it. But ninivarana means an unobstructed mind. In other words, open. You're not obstructing things, it's open. And then uddhaka. Uddhaka chitta. Uddhaka means tall. There's an order member in England who's called Uddhaka, and he's really tall. So it means high, and therefore it means exalted, it means elated, it means inspired. So what you have to remember is the Buddha's talking to someone and he's telling them about the spiritual life. So as the person's listening, if they're receptive, they're getting happier and happier as he's talking. And now they're really inspired by what he's saying. Yeah? And finally, Prasanna Chitta. Prasanna is one of those ancient words which means lots of things. It's almost like prasanna means everything that's good. So it means clear. It means pure. It means bright. It also means happy. But it's a bit different from uddhagga. And the uddhagga is a kind of inspired up happiness. You know, it's like, whoa, you're really up. But this is a quieter kind of happiness, and it's usually the kind of happiness on account of the fact that you've been very ethical. Yeah? You know that contented happiness you feel when you haven't done anything bad to anyone. You've been good to people, and you feel good about that. So it means that. But it also means trust and devotion and faith. So you have to remember again that the Buddha's been talking to you for quite a while, and you're beginning to trust him. You're beginning to feel this man has got something really important, and I feel I can trust that, so I'm opening up to him. Yeah. So this is the Kala Chitta, the ready state of mind, where you're ready to really receive the way things are. And it's Mudu, Ninivarana, Uddhagga and Prasanna. Why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you because I was thinking, you know, as I was writing that book, the big question for me is why? What is the point of these sutras? Why read them over and over and over again? What's the point of that? And then I realised, well, I think what they're doing is, they're trying to get you into this state of mind. They're trying to lift you up out of the humdrum, ordinary, everyday world, out into an imaginative realm. Remember, Buddhism doesn't make a distinction between mind and world. So when you're in an imaginative state of mind, you live in an imaginative world. And you know this from your own experience, I'm sure. If you've been on retreat, you go on retreat, say, or even a weekend retreat, you know, a lot of the time you're doing the mindfulness of breathing, and it's the breath, the breath and thoughts, come back to the breath. It's a bit like that, and you know, you don't feel you're getting anywhere. But if you go on retreat, maybe once on that weekend, maybe more if you're lucky, but maybe once, you actually get really concentrated, and all your worries drop away, and it's almost like you get into a different world. And you don't know this until you open your eyes, but when you open your eyes, the world actually looks different. You have that experience? It looks like a different world than the one when you started the meditation. I mean, the walls are still there, but the walls are somehow brighter and a bit more porous. They're a bit less hard. And when you go outside, well, the grass is something else. You know, it's like, wow, what happened to the grass? How did it get so green? Well, it's your mind, isn't it? So your mind has changed, so the world that you live in has changed. So I think what the texts are doing, they're trying to get you into this state of mind. And then, in the midst of this kind of crazy description of this strange imaginative world, like in the longer sutra, 100 or so pages, and many of those pages are a description of this world. And then, like, there were rivers. Yeah, I'll just tell you about the rivers before the end. The rivers are very, very wide. You know, like hundreds of miles wide and so many miles deep. And they don't smell of the rivers in this world. They smell beautiful and, you know, it's lovely. And the sound of them is like an orchestra. It's really, really pleasant to hear that sound. So just imagine that when you're doing this practice, you have to imagine that. You have to imagine these massive rivers with flowers, big bunches of flowers going down them, and you can hear like music coming from them, and it soothes the mind and it makes you feel wonderful. And then what you hear is the river murmuring impermanence, peace, no self, a wisdom teaching in the midst of this beautiful description. That's it. And then it goes back to this description. And it just happens the once, 100 pages, and just the once, the wisdom teaching. So you've got to really be on the ball, because if your mind wanders at that point, you've blown it. That's it, until the next time you go through the sutra. You've got to be really on the ball. And if you've been really paying attention and really imagining that world, you'll be more or less in this state of mind. So when you hear that word, impermanence, or the word peace, or the word no self, it actually hits you. It goes right in. And you realise that the world really is impermanent. Yeah? That there really is no self, there's no substance to anything. These, the Mahayana, the people who wrote Mahayana Sutras assumed that you know about Buddhism already. They assumed that. And these words are actually words taken from phrases. So impermanence, the phrase is, all conditioned things are impermanent. Yeah. And then peace, nirvana alone is peace, or awakening, enlightenment alone is peace. And then third one is, all things whatsoever are without selfhood. So you need to know all that, you need to have studied all that to know the significance of the words, otherwise they're just words. So you need to know all that. But when you hear them in that state of mind, they really can go in. Yeah, that seems to be the end. Yeah, I've come to the end of the talk without really realising it. Yeah, but yeah, you can ask questions if you want. You were very well behaved this evening. 2 evenings ago, I could hardly get through the talk. People began disagreeing with me immediately. different ways of looking at things. It was very stimulating, but it was, yeah. But you just let me talk all the way through. Thank you for that. No questions. Okay.
We're all still impressed. So I think we should.
We are impressed of the nice
Yes.
images that you give to me.
Do you want
That's
some
why
more?
we are thinking. They are getting deeper and deeper. We are coming in the Kalasita.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. So when I say all conditioned things are impermanent, it's really affects you. Let's end with the mantra. Amitabha is the Buddha of this world, right? So let's end with his mantra, but in a tune that you've never heard before, I think, probably. Yeah. So I'll have to do it a few times, and then once you think you've got it, you can just join in with me. And well, it'll probably go on for a bit longer than 5 minutes. So leave when you need to leave. Don't feel you have to stay until the mantra finishes. A mantra. A mantra is the kind of what the Buddha sounds like. It's a kind of, it's sometimes called a kind of, doesn't matter. I've got no words left. No words left. Om Amideva Hui. 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 Om Amideva
Nami Deva Gri.